bold, and extremely fun. It's Sunrise with Craig Froelich right here on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com. Join in the conversation by calling 541-772-8255. Sunrise, where it matters what you think.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sunrise Show right here on KCMX News Talk 880. Glad you are with us this morning, continuing in our debate series, and thrilled to bring in 4 of the 5 candidates for United States Senate on the Republican side. I want to introduce Mark Callahan and Tim Crawley and Joe Ray Perkins and Representative Jason Conger into this, welcome them into the studio, and of course get our mics all turned on and get everybody running. We've got just a limited amount of time. We want to get into the breaks and get as many questions as we possibly can. And tell you what, Mark Callahan comes in from Salem. You can get to his website, callahanfororegon.com. Tim Crawley comes out of Portland, and his website, crawleyfororegon.com, CRAWLEY. Joe Ray Perkins is out of Albany, and it's perkinsforussenate.com. And Representative Jason Conger is out of Bend, and it's congerfororegon.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you into the studio so much, and thank you for being here. And Representative Conger, we're going to be sharing that mic, and I'll swap back and forth, but thank you for coming in. I want to give everyone a minute for introduction, and so Representative Conger, I'll start with you, and I'll start our timer, and we'll, to get as much as we possibly can, I want to make sure you can see that. And Jason, tell us about yourself.
Oh, first of all, Craig, thanks for having us in the studio today. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful morning, and I'm glad to be down here in God's country. I am a husband of 25 years this year, married to my wife, Amy, father of 5 children, and I practice law in Bend. I'm a partner with the law firm Miller Nash, which is a Portland firm, and I've had the privilege for the past 3.5 years of representing my community in the state legislature, and had a very tough couple of elections, uphill battles, and won both of them resoundingly in a kind of grassroots campaign. Very proud of that, very thankful for all the people who helped in those campaigns. And I would just conclude by saying I love Oregon, and I am ready to step up and represent people in the U.S. Senate.
Excellent, excellent, good deal. And 3 seconds to spare. How about that? Tim, thank you for coming in. And there you go. Get that. There you go. And so tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Again, Craig, thank you very much for having us in the studio. And good morning to the.
Absolutely.
Jackson County, and very happy to be here. I'm living right now in the southeast of Portland with my wife Ashley. And my background is in conflict resolution, and I've dealt with. I'm an attorney right now with Nichols and Associates. I've dealt in conflict resolution for a number of years, nearly a decade, and have dealt with conflict in the Middle East between the Israelis and Palestinians in the peace brokering process.
Amazing, yeah.
It's time to start bringing civility back to the dialogue in Washington, D.C., so that we can actually get something done. We are spread so thin that the federal government can't do anything right, and it's about time we have that dialogue about where the government should be involved in and what it should not be involved in.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Mark, tell us about yourself.
Well, good morning, Craig. Thanks. Great to be here this morning. I'm an IT guy by trade. I'm a father, average American. I love our country, and we just need to get our country back on the right track. It got to the point for me where I just had to get off the couch, stop watching TV and complaining, and actually get out there and do something about it. The central message of my campaign is freedom, and it's one we've been getting across the state that's being embraced by not only Republicans, but also non-affiliated voters and independents, as well as some Democrats, too. But it's what we need to get our country back on the right track, and it's what I'm committed to doing.
Excellent. Mark, thank you so much. Time to spare. How about that? Miss Jo Ray?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Craig, for having us in. Much appreciated.
I'm very pleased to have you all in, absolutely.
My name is Jo Ray Perkins, and yes, I am running for the United States Senate as the most conservative candidate running to displace the most liberal senator in Washington, D.C. Oregon made it number one. That's not the good thing to be made number one in. I'm running because it's time that we have citizen legislators that are in Washington, D.C., Main Street Americans who understand what the role of the U.S. Senate is, who is going to go back there to represent the state of Oregon, because that's what the senator does. The House represents the voters, the Senate represents the state. I'm a big proponent of states' rights. And we've got to hold to what the Constitution says our role is, and to give back to those states those things that are best meant for the state's people to handle. My name's Jo Ray Perkins.
Excellent. Jo Ray, thank you so much. And I agree, you must be going crazy over the Clive and Bundy case in Nevada.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, all right, so I want to get to our first question. I want to have time for rebuttal and discussion is what it is, not just kind of a dialogue, because I want to get into a debate situation. So my first question really, and I want to start, Tim, with you, and that would be kind of just, there you go, is what are the biggest issues facing Oregonians? And along with that is tied in with what are you hearing in all the forums and wherever your visits are, what are folks faced with that the Senate, you as a senator in the United States Senate, could do something about? I mean, I know there's issues, but it focuses on what you can do in the Senate, and so I give you a minute on that, Tim.
Yes, so one of the big issues is obviously health care, and it's on many people's minds, many Oregonians' minds. And it's amazing that the entire program was set up to burden a particular generation for the predominant costs of the program when that generation is having difficulty even finding jobs at this point. So our priorities are really all over the place, and what we need to do is, as an incoming senator, the first step that I can take is to gather together those folks, the incoming congressmen and women, to have that dialogue about what the role of the federal government should be and how we can start to get our economy back into shape.
Yeah, affecting change. I mean, that's ultimately how do we do that? Mark, I want to go next to you, and that is, what is the biggest issues facing Oregonians?
I would agree with Tim on the health care issue. Obamacare is socialism, it's evil, it needs to go away. Would be a full repeal. But we're also facing Common Core that's infecting our schools, as well as on an international level, Agenda 21. And all those are bordering on socialism, if not communism themselves. And it's not what our country's about. It's affecting our sovereignty. It's affecting our freedom. And they all need to go away. Another issue is immigration reform, or actually enforcing the existing laws, securing the borders, and saying no to amnesty. So if I had to narrow it down to 4 issues, those would be the 4 issues I would pick.
And then a matter of getting to the Senate and affecting change?
Exactly. I mean, in terms of Obamacare, as I said, I advocate for full repeal. Common Core, we need to basically eliminate by eliminating the U.S. Department of Education. Agenda 21, we just need to get our land, and we need to get our sovereignty back and stop the UN from affecting our country and our freedom.
Exactly. And I have a problem with national graduation rates of high schools at 72% and Oregon at 64%.
Exactly.
Well, Jackson County, for that matter. Ms. Jo Ray, the biggest issues facing Oregonians.
Thank you for this question, Craig. I actually asked this question to a group of ladies the other night, and there's 7 or 8 ladies, and I asked them. It was jobs, it was the economy, it was the Affordable Care Act. And the list went on, and I looked at them, I said, ladies, in my almost 40 years of voting, I can never recall a time when we've had so many major issues facing our country simultaneously, to which they all agreed, and most of them were had a few years on me. The whole thing boiled down to regulation. Too much government regulation stepping into our lives every single day. The federal government has so overstretched where they're supposed to be. It is strangling America. And so that is the big thing. We get the federal government to back off, jobs will automatically be created because people are going to be able to free up some cash to be able to start businesses and get this economy rolling again.
Excellent, excellent. Representative Jason Conger, give me your thoughts on this biggest issues facing Oregonians and changing it in the Senate especially.
Sure, Greg. I think, first of all, it depends on where you live in Oregon and your particular situation, what you think the biggest issue is. But I would say if I'm elected, my top 3 issues to work on are to fight to repeal Obamacare and replace it with healthcare reform that actually makes healthcare more affordable first. Second would be to restore active management to our federal forests and get those people, folks back to work and get some healthier forests for our future. And the third would be to balance the federal budget and start paying down the national debt. But I think the biggest problem that we face just collectively is a loss of confidence in our own government. I think people have the view that the government is an adversary, not a protector, not a helper, not a servant of them. And it should be, it's our government. It's a government of the people, meaning we own it. So I think this election's an opportunity to take that back and show people that, in fact, the government can work for them.
There you go. Good deal. You did it. All right, good deal. Listen, this calls for a break. Let's do that. Quick little break. Ladies and gentlemen, the debate series continues. We have the Senate candidates in on the Republican side, United States Senate in the state of Oregon, Representative Jason Conger, Tim Crowley, Mark Callahan, and Joe Ray Perkins. And we'll be right back. Stay tuned. More after this, rebuttal, and more questions for the candidates. Coming up.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX News Talk 880. A little bold and extremely fun, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. Here's Craig.
If you want to dance with me, I have no kick against modern girls.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. 21 minutes after the hour. Glad you're with us. We're going to get right into it. Our debate series with the Republican candidates for United States Senate. 4 of the 5 are in the studio. Dr. Monica Webby could not make it today. We have Jason Conger and Tim Crowley and Mark Callahan and Joe Ray Perkins in the studio this morning. My question, Mark, to you is, and I'll start the timer, is what separates you from your fellow Republicans? Because this is on the Republican primary. The voters on the Republican side have to make a choice, 1 of 5, to put forward for that. So what separates you, in your estimation, related to the other candidates on the platform?
Well, I'm a problem solver, Craig. I've been doing IT work, information technology work for about 14 years now. And I think about things analytically. I think about things, I troubleshoot problems, and when I see a problem, I diagnose the problem, I figure out what's actually going on with the problem, and then I think about it analytically. I get the end user, at least in my IT career, I get them back on the right track as fast as possible by solving their problem for them. And I think that's what we need in the U.S. Senate, because we get a lot of problems in our U.S. Senate right now, our U.S. government for that matter, where we need them solved. We need analytical thinkers. We need problem solvers in there that are able to actually look at problems and solve the problems and not be concerned with ideological things like advancing their career or getting reelected, etc. I'm just an average guy. I mean, I'm just coming from business myself, as I said, been doing IT consulting work, and I just think about things analytically and I solve problems.
So you're the best at what you do then?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, good deal. Joe Ray, what separates you from the other candidates?
The first thing that I feel separates me from the other candidates is I'm at a point in my life, the kids are grown, they're out of the house, we're empty nesters. Our son or daughter, they're off attempting to make their way in this crazy economy that we're dealing with and following their own dreams. My background is in financial planning, helping families budget their money to get out of debt. And it's something that I have been working on and looking at the economic state of the country and the $17.5+ trillion of current debt and $126 trillion of future unfunded liabilities. We toss these numbers out like they're nothing, but it's big numbers. So I bring that financial background to the table. I know how to negotiate. I'm a former realtor. I sat down with parties who, and found the common ground. I'm able to bring people in. I have met a person online on Facebook. She was a Democrat. She's now a registered Republican, so she has moved from being a Democrat to a Republican. Another gentleman, he's done the same thing. In fact, I think there's been 4 people just this week alone that told me, Joe Ray, we want to vote for you. We are changing because you get it. You understand what it's like out there. You listen to what's on the minds and the hearts of the people. And I am the only candidate that I'm aware of so far that has publicly stated that I will work in the U.S. Senate race, that I will work to set back the lands, the federally owned lands, back to the states.
Okay, Joey. And we'll get our timer. I missed the button on that. Jason, what separates you from the other Republican candidates?
Well, I think there's 5 candidates in the race, so there are issues
very difficult for voters.
It is very difficult. Exactly. It's hard to. I'm sure it's hard for voters to acquire the information they need to understand the differences, and there are differences on issues between us. Dr. Webby's not here, but she's pro-choice. I think. I shouldn't speak for everyone else. I'm pro-life. She's pro-gay marriage. I'm pro-traditional marriage. Those are distinctions that I think are pretty clear. The other difference, I guess, from all of the other 4 is that I have had the experience of winning in uphill battles, winning elections that were long odds. I ran against a woman incumbent Democrat in 2010 and was able to win overwhelmingly with a lot of help from all our campaign team. And I've been in the legislature, so I've been successful at passing legislation. I know how the process works.
There you go. All right, Jason, thank you. Tim, I'll direct the question for you. Because of 5 candidates on the Republican side, and this makes it very difficult for voters, you as being one of them, what separates you from the other candidates? Good, bad, indifferent? What are your strengths?
Sure. Thank you, Craig. As I mentioned, conflict resolution. I have a background in conflict resolution, and that really that translates to coalition building. I've been dealing in coalition building for a number of years now, and I'm coming from the independent party. So I am a Republican. However, I've re-registered as a Republican, and coming from the independent party, there are interests that the independent party has. There are interests that the unaffiliated voters have, and these interests need to be recognized by the Republican Party if they want to make up the 7% differential between Republicans and Democrats. That is a very important factor in this race. How do we actually win? And that's what has to be on the minds of voters, and we have to be able to recognize that there are a variety of differences, and we might not agree with everyone on everything, but there has to be some sort of basic premise that we're all operating from.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim. Mark, I finished up with you, right? I started with you, so you're good. All right, good deal. I want to make sure. We've got just enough time to finish up on the break. I want to get everyone's website out before we go to break. Mark Callahan, his website, callahanfororegon.com. Tim Crowley's website is Crowley for Oregon. That's CRAWLEY for Oregon.com. Jo Rae Perkins, her website is PerkinsForUSSenate.com. And Representative Jason Conger, his website is CongerForOregon.com. I encourage everyone to check those websites out. It's going to be difficult. Related to the 5, and of course, Dr. Monica Webby, and it's Webby for, I don't know. I'm sorry. Sorry, Dr. Monica, I don't know it off the top of my head. So I tell you what, we want to take a quick break, and we'll follow up with questions and things like that right after we come back. But I tell you what, I want to get into the situation of next is common thread amongst Oregonians. And yes, how can the Republicans take back a Senate seat in the United States Senate? Is that going to be possible? Because the U.S. Senator Ron Wyden's there, and now the youngest member, United States Senate, Jeff Merkley, is there. And how do we take that over? We'll be back after the break, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. More on the show.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX News Talk 880. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com and go to the Talk to Us tab. Send us your thoughts. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes.
So she could hear my man a wail the sax. I must admit they have a rockin' band. Man, they were blowing like a hurricane. That's why I go for that rock and roll music. Any old way you choose it. It's got a backbeat, you can't lose it.
Good morning, morning, everybody. Welcome back. 33 minutes after the hour, little Chuck Berry in this morning, and continuing with our Republican Senate debate, our debate series here with the Republican candidates, Jason Conger and Tim Crowley and Mark Callahan and Joe Ray Perkins, and thrilled to have everyone in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in, everybody, this morning, and continuing the dialogue. And my focus was give the voters the information they need to make their decision, because I constantly are looking at the undervote on these issues, and people are confused. They don't know what to do. And then I will put it back on the voters, the responsibility and the accountability to take the time to study the issues, to study the candidates, and don't just take the ballot the last day and go, who do you vote for? Who do you vote for? And fill it in, because I look and I see the undervote, and it's in the thousands. And, the margin of error on the Senate race in 2008, wasn't that many. It was only a couple thousand in Jackson County. And it's just like, okay. And then the undervote was a couple thousand. So you're thinking it would have swung that Senate race. And I've seen so many races, whether it's a sheriff's race or commissioner race, the undervote has been a huge key. So, Joe Ray, I want to go to you, and that is what gets voters' attention. I mean, if you're struggling to meet and greet folks, what gets their attention that they will come out and vote? I mean, I struggle every day on the show. Joe Ray, I'm just going to go a dialogue, quick answer. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on that, but
what gets voters' attention?
Yeah.
What's going on in America has woken up a lot of people, and folks, we need you to rattle the cages of your friends that are just going, well, politics doesn't really affect my life. I'm sorry, politics affects every facet of your life. From the time you wake up in the morning with your alarm clock, because guess what? That's regulated. To what you cook on your stove, because guess what? That's regulated. The gas you put in your car, it's regulated. So politics affects every single thing that we do with all of these regulations. The biggest things, of course, that we're seeing is the Affordable Care Act, the loss of jobs, the numbers of people that are having to be on government assistance now just so that they can get by and make ends meet. This is really a wake-up call to a lot of people of going, wow, I was working 40 hours a week. Now I'm not even getting in 30 because the Affordable Care Act, my employer can't afford these skyrocketing premiums. They're cutting us back.
Yeah, okay, I'll go right into my, and I want to come back to timber because that's huge. And we're going to just go a quick little dialogue. Jason, how do you get people to vote?
Well, I think it would be very, very helpful if if we could remind folks of the price that has been paid over centuries, the last couple of centuries, to have the right to vote, to self-govern.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
it is not a given in the world that that people in any country or any nation in history have been able to select their leaders to have elections.
And in
so it's
India,
valuable.
You have people walking for days to vote, and I saw in Ohio, they stood around the block to vote. They waited for hours, and that was amazing. Tim, what do you get folks to vote? I mean, encouraging them to vote, because it's an American, it's a right, it's a privilege, actually, to vote, and they should take advantage of that privilege. How can we motivate people to vote?
Certainly, I think that, when I mention the Federal Reserve, and particularly when it was created in 1913, people start to listen a little bit. And I think what's interesting about it is the creation of dependency by a banking cartel. But in 1913, when they basically advocated and achieved the ability for consumer purchases, interest on consumer financing to be a tax deduction. At that point, the banking cartel created a scenario that created dependency of the people on them, and that's everything from a purchase to a home to home appliances. And before that, you could purchase your home. With cash. After that point, after 1913, you had to go to the bank to get a loan.
Crazy. Mark, how do you get people to vote? I mean, how do you instill this patriotic duty that they need to come out and utilize their privilege and study and work and discuss, rather than this short fuse hate mongering back and forth that is just so. It's horrible for Americans. It's horrible. What can you say about that?
I believe you have to have a good message there, Craig. I mean, right now, a lot of Americans out there and a lot of people here in the state of Oregon make their decision on who they're going to vote for based on the money. And the money isn't as important as the message. You have to have a good, strong conservative, one that's pro-life, pro-gun, believes in God and not afraid to admit to it like I am. And you have to have the good message out there. You have to have a message of freedom. That people are embracing, as you stated about the independents and non-affiliated voters, you have to have the message of freedom, something that they know that it can embrace, something that it's being affected by our current government, right, the current administration with the NSA spying on us and the IRS targeting our conservative groups. I mean, right now our freedom, our very constitutional republic is being affected, and you have to have that message of freedom as opposed to just a lot of money to basically run a campaign.
Exactly. You know, I want to come back to our timed responses because I want to talk about jobs and ONC funds, and this is going to be in the Senate because the House has passed, you know, with our Congressman Walden and Fawzi Schrader bill, but now it's gone to the Senate, and Senator Ron Wyden has made a new bill, and it's sitting there, Land Grant Act of 2013, and going into the Senate. What would you do to affect Senate? And Jason, this is going to go to you, is what would you do to get into the Senate and get the rest of the senators to listen to what's happening, ONC lands in Oregon, and getting our jobs back rather than having them burn up? And I get so irritated because we had $60 billion was the value of the Douglas Complex fire, and $60 billion tended to get some attention in Washington. But now, let's do something about it and get Oregonians. He says he wants to get them back into the woods and get back to jobs, but I want it now. I've been waiting 20 years to get back in and have investors go in. So, Jason, you got a minute? Respond to that.
Well, first of all, obviously, I think we're in agreement, and I doubt you'll hear any disagreement today from anyone about the need to actively manage those forests. I mean, the federal government is a non-tax-paying landowner of a vast amount of the wealth and the land, especially, of course, in rural communities. That affects the ability to provide services as well as people's ability to have opportunity and a career and a decent job. And we have all of this wealth out there. And a real need to protect the forests themselves from the risk of catastrophic wildfire. So the necessities there. I think the problem in the reason a good bill hasn't been passed is because of the difference between the House and the Senate right now. And you know, if a Republican is elected from Oregon and goes back and it will actually advocate for a solution, he will be part of a Republican majority in the Senate, and we can pass the compromise bill from the House and start getting people back to work.
Tim, I want to send that to you. We've got Tim Crawley, candidate for United States Senate, in the studio with us this morning, and along with the other three candidates. And ONC lands. I mean, we are. It is so ridiculous. Desperate people will do desperate things, and the Curry County, Josephine County, they are just cut to the core, and now we have a law enforcement problem. It is, the island, the natives are restless. They're going to cause huge problems. How can we get back into the woods, get this ONC thing dealt with? Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to note that the ONC lands came into the federal government hands because of a failed railroad deal between California and Oregon, a private organization that was building that. These many of the federal lands also came into federal hands because in order to get into the Union, you had to pay the federal government inland. So this is sort of how this all got started. One of the things that I don't think has been addressed to sufficiency by either plan, either the Wyden plan or the Walden plan, was the addressing the issue of the federal leasing of the land. I think we need to really address corporate cronyism and what happened with the Endangered Species Act and wiping out the small businesses, the small mills that were operating at the time, and leaving only the big businesses left to refurbish and become more efficient and essentially provide less jobs to the community.
Yeah. Mark, same kind of thing. The ONC lands, and what to do in the Senate. Can we get some attention from the United States Senate
I think what we have here, Craig, is a lot of other senators and a lot of other representatives in the House Representatives side are making decisions based on our own state sovereignty, and it's basically none of their business in terms of controlling our lands and controlling our own state sovereignty here. As I mentioned earlier before, I mean, we have things like Agenda 21 that are affecting our sovereignty and that are affecting our control of our own lands. I mean, the short answer, Craig, is to basically get our land back and support legislation, sponsor legislation, so we can actually build our communities back, build our local economies, invest that money back into the schools and the local economy so we can have jobs here in Oregon. And we need to stop things like Agenda 21. We need to stop other states or other people that get on this control complex where they think they can control our economy here in Oregon from some state back east just because they're in the Congress or the Senate.
Exactly. And what I ask all the politicians is, what are you after? Are you going to create ghost towns? I mean, that's ultimately, what are you trying to create?
Exactly.
Because that's what they're going to get. So, Joe Ray?
Well, let's start with the bill, Wyden's bill. First of all, he's advocating about $1.6 billion of board feet harvested a year, and he calls that sustainable. That is so far below the sustainable figures, which the last real figure was 50 billion board feet a year, not 1.5 or 1.6. The second thing, that land, according to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution, is very specific as to what land belongs to the federal government. It says 10 square miles, which is Washington, D.C., plus land for military uses and other needful buildings that is purchased. 53% of Oregon is owned by the federal government, 70% in Josephine County alone. This land needs to go back to the state and then back down to the people. Forget managing it from the federal government. Let's get it back into private ownership so that the people can properly manage it and put people back to work.
How are they going to do that? I just don't. You know, the rest of the Senate, this is the problem. We've talked to Congressman Greg Walden, and when he's on the floor, he's not getting a response from anyone else in the House. And the Senate, the same. And, I'm not saying that our congressmen and our senators aren't doing what they're doing, but at the same time, I don't think they're lobbying hard enough, and quite frankly, I bring it back to the people. We didn't scream loud enough, and we let it go by. It's a shame, I have to admit that, but I don't remember the money. I mean, I've been here for 30 years in the Valley, and I don't remember the figures, the money saying, listen, if you don't vote, if you don't get the timber industry back in, we're going to lose millions of dollars, $20 million a year to the counties, and $100 million to the 18, ONC lands. Back again, Jason, and I've got a break, so why don't we do that? Perfect break right now, and then come back, because I have more to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing on our debate series right here on KCMX News Talk 880. We'll be back with our candidates, Mark Callahan, Tim Crowley, Joe Ray Perkins, and Representative Jason Conger right here on the Sunrise Show. Don't go away.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX News Talk 880. A little bold and extremely fun, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. Here's Craig.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Sunrise with KCMX. Sunrise right here. And I'm thrilled to have in our candidates for United States Senate on the Republican ticket. Dr. Monica Webby, unfortunately, could not make it today. But we have Mark Callahan, Tim Crowley, Joe Ray Perkins, and Jason Conger in the studio with us this morning. And we're talking about how the Senate can be more effective for the state of Oregon. And, I think Oregonians are just kind of, their heads are blowing up because they don't get anything. They haven't talked jobs. I mean, Senator Jeff Merkley has talked about oil, and he's talked about electric cars, and he hasn't talked about jobs.
Don't forget filibuster reform. I mean, that was a big one. That's okay. Important to everyone.
Exactly right. And so I'm wondering, how do we get the message to Oregonians? I mean, Joe Ray, what in the world do we get our Oregon, our Senate race back? We've got Ron Merkley, Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley there. And have they been effective for Oregon? Yes or no?
No.
Mark, have the senators been effective for Oregon? Yes or no?
No, they haven't.
Tim, yes or no?
No.
Not at all. Jason?
Of course not.
Of course not. So the next thing is, how do we affect change? And it takes all players, Democrats, Independents, Republicans. So how do you talk to your brothers and sisters that are Democrats and Independents that, hey, our debt is up, our Cover Oregon isn't working, you need to, let's talk sense rather than just be a hate-mongering thing. We're bringing back to Tim on this question. How would you bring people together? And this goes past the primary, because obviously we're just talking Republicans, but how would you bring people together and discuss change and discuss something that is good, healthy dialogue for Americans?
Yes, I think the first place we need to start is our vocabulary. Like, what kind of words are we using? Centralization, for example, it's equal to wealth inequality. These are basic. The reason why is because the more you centralize, the greater a distance you create between the people on the bottom of the triangle and the people on the top of the triangle. And it's only one triangle, and it grows and grows and grows. And so we can also talk about decentralization and it increasing diversity. Diversity in our economy, diversity of people, of resources, all of these things.
Accepting people for who they are.
Exactly. Accepting people for who they are and not using the government as a platform to advocate for your particular moral viewpoint. And we can simplify it down to that. We are all in a position where we need to advocate for change on an economic standpoint, from the position of jobs. And we have to be reaching out into areas that combine, that coalesce between the parties, and that ultimately has to be focused on.
All right, good deal, good deal. I'm glad the timer was there. Mark, related to what do we do to bring people in, Independent, Democrat, and cut that short fuse and that hate-mongering speech that is going on, because I'm trying to improve the dialogue among Americans. And, right front page of the Medford paper today, a man was trying to ask people to turn the music down. He ended up getting stabbed over the deal. I mean, how do you bring people together, Mark?
I think we need to concentrate on what we all are here. We're all Americans here, for one, and two, we're all fiscal conservatives to some extent. We all know what it takes to keep a roof over our head and food in our kids' belly, and I think if we can concentrate on that, in addition to holding on to our principles, but not letting our principles on things like social issues divide us, I think we're going to be good right there. Right now, you have Jeff Merkley that's going to be out there on the trail after the primary talking about things like global warming or climate change or whatever the word or phrase of the day is going to be talking about income inequality and stuff like that. These are distractions. But the point is that we need to be talking about the real issues, and the real issue is our freedom. Our freedom is being affected here, and it's being controlled by the environmentalists, by the people that want to give us all these distractions. I thought in terms of the income inequality issue, I mean, they're basically concentrating on one pie. I say we're Americans here. We're based upon American exceptionalism. If we need our own pie, let's bake our own pie, a separate pie, to be able to pursue our own dreams and pursue our own aspirations in terms of pursuing freedom.
Exactly. Joe Ray and Jeff Merkley was down with the town hall meeting recently, and he brought up global warming and climate change, and here we were right in the middle of the NSA issue and really didn't even get to it till the end, and everybody was in the room jumping up and down about global warming and climate change, and that's good stuff. I get that, but put that in the back. Let's get people back to work. Joe Ray?
Well, that's how we're going to make a change. I want to bring up a couple things here because I want to go back to that last question. Defend Rural America and the American Lands Council, Ken Ivory, who is a state legislator from Utah, they have been on the forefront of this. There's a state legislator, U.S. representative from Idaho. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. And they are all part of this movement to get this federally owned, illegally owned land back to the states. That's going to create jobs. At the end of the day, Americans want to work. They want to be able to define their own success. I've talked to people that have immigrated here from Russia, from other European countries, and they've come here because this has been the country where they go, wow, we can create our own success. We can provide for our families without the government telling us everything that we have to do. And then they get here and they go, oh my gosh. So we've got, again, it goes back to getting the government out of our lives.
Jason?
Well, your question, I think, was how do you get things done in the Senate?
Yeah.
And it's a very good question. I think the first point is most people are typical, right? I mean, they respond better to being having someone respectful talk to them, not someone hateful or yelling, or immediately jumping to anger. But with that said, you do also need an advocate. We need an advocate in the Senate. We just don't have it in Ron Wyden or Jeff Merkley. I think, if you look back at my record in the legislature, I started out when I ran in 2009 talking about the need to reform PERS because the liability was so great in the state. It took 3.5 years, but we actually did it, and it knocked $4.5 billion off of our long-term liability in the state, which is greater, I think, than the bonding debt from the general fund, the entire bonding debt of the state. But it took time, it took effort, and it took persistence. So you need those qualities. You need the ability to interact with people without resorting immediately to anger and hate. But you also need strength and a firm conviction and a focus on the issues that you want to change.
Yeah, more of a resolve. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, those are the calls coming in. The lights, the switchboard is lit up like crazy. No, that's our timers going off. We have Jason Conger in the studio along with Joe Ray Perkins and Tim Crawley and Mark Callahan this morning in the Republican candidates for United States Senate. And in our last minute, Jason, tell me bullet points your values. Give me about 20 seconds. 15 seconds.
Well, I am conservative. I am very, very pro-family. Very convinced that is a fundamental building block of society. It's also important to me because of my faith and because of my love of my children. I'm pro-life.
Yeah.
I am.
Tim, tell me bullet point values.
Don't forget about gay marriage. I'm for marriage between a man and a woman.
Tim?
Yes, values, absolutely independence. And I think that, and also rising above sort of the intransigent party warfare that's happening right now, seeking common ground, seeking resolution, seeking ways to identify with other folks, and not seeing someone as a Democrat with this, and this point.
Mark?
Well, keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-God. I'm 100% pro-life. Life begins at conception. I'm a strong Christian. I believe in God myself. I'm not ashamed to admit it. And
Joe Ray?
Yes.
Bullet points.
Bullet points. Okay, so first, my order is God, family, country. I am pro-life, pro-traditional marriage. I believe that we need to stand behind the Constitution, and I will not compromise my core values or compromise against what the Constitution says.
Excellent. All right, we'll be back. More on the Sunrise Show when we return.
A little bold and extremely fun. It's Sunrise with Craig Vronick right here on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com. Join in the conversation by calling 541-772-8255. Sunrise, where it matters what you think.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sunrise Show. 7 minutes after the hour. Thank you for joining us. 51 degrees this morning. Going to be 68 today. 58 degrees. Not that warm, but I'll take every drop of rain we can get our hands on. Welcoming in our Republican candidates for United States Senate, Jason Conger, Joe Ray Perkins, Tim Crawley, and Mark Callahan. And a great dialogue so far, and there's so much more to cover. I want to get right to it. And because we brought up timber and jobs, the response now is, and this is, you're going to be on the sidelines watching what the Senate does in the event of a horrible fire season and getting monies in and having monies come down from the federal government. You know, how do you, I guess, Tim, I'll direct this question to you. Getting in with the federal government and the state of Oregon, where I know Oregonians feel that they haven't been represented. They just don't feel like they're connected with their senators. And it's just so few and far between that we get touch and go with the senator. I mean, Ron Wyden's in town today, okay, but he's talking about the brewery and, you know, the issue between the farmers and the spent grain and more FDA control. Nothing about jobs. And people want jobs. Joe Ray, you said it perfectly. We want to just work. So how does the Senate get out of the way of themselves, basically? And how do you explain that to Republicans and folks that may want to be, you know, voting for you? Tim?
Well, actually, I think the first step as a political leader or that's elected by the people is to listen. And I think that's the first and foremost. When we go out and we're interacting with the citizens of Oregon, we have to be able to really hone in on what people are trying how they're trying to express themselves, and that is absolutely the number one point to this job. But as far as, you know, how we can go ahead and affect change with respect to jobs, I mean, there's definitely a consciousness towards the ecology and the environment here in Oregon, and people are very much aware of that. There's been drastic strides made in the development of technologies and how clean jobs can be created. We can absolutely do this with shared interests, but we need to focus on getting folks back to work. And increase in taxes does not equate to increase in jobs. Government-created positions are not jobs. What is consumer spending, for example.
Exactly right. The revenue, the property taxes, those kind of things. Mark, same kind of thing. How do we develop Oregonians? I mean, what's good for Oregon? You know.
Well, as Reagan once said, President Reagan, one of our greatest presidents in our history, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. Yeah. So what we need to do is actually get back to what's stating in our U.S. Constitution and get government out of the way of American exceptionalism, of American innovation and creativity. We need to allow Oregonians to actually build businesses, to start businesses via entrepreneurs, and actually allow them to not be constrained or squelched by the regulations all the time. Right now we have a government that's too big and too unaccountable for their behavior, and they're spending money like it's going out of style. It's basically printing the money out of the printing presses in the basement or something like that. Our money is worth less. We just need to get government out of the way to allow Oregonians and Americans to actually be able to run their lives and run their businesses as they see fit, as opposed to the way the government sees fit.
Exactly. Joe Ray?
Would you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I want to know, for Oregon and Oregonians, what can the Senate do and what can you do to affect change? I mean, you know, get the talking out of the way. Let's do something. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, this has been the same thing that I've been saying all morning long. We've got to shrink the size of the federal government. We've got to start closing down agencies that are telling us what we can do and what we cannot do. Let's take the BLM and what happened with Cliven Bundy. You know, here's another small businessman who's being run out of business. The same things happened down in Texas. That's a new one that just came out this week. The government keeps trying to tell us what we can do, what we can't do. How many pounds per whatever of pollutants can go into the air so that, you know, the CO2 carbon, or the CO2 output. You can't do this. You can't do this. We've got to reduce our carbon footprint. Reduce our carbon footprint. What are the trees going to live off of?
Oh, yeah.
The environmentalists, they've lost touch with what's going on. It's all about shrinking the size of the federal government, and let's start closing down these agencies that we don't need.
All right. Jason?
Well, if the question is getting Oregonians back to work, the first and most available way to do that at any significant scale is clearly to actively manage our federal forests, because the federal land ownership and the value of the federal forest in Oregon is so enormous, and it is a renewable supply that feeds into a value-added manufacturing industry with a high demand right now. And generates very good jobs. But beyond that, I think, you know, there are obviously issues that are deep and fundamental and structural in Oregon. We talked earlier, but I don't think we were on the air, about the graduation rate.
Oh.
You know, if we're not able to graduate a third of our high school seniors, their future and their impact on the economy is going to be dramatically worse than it would be if they were on a path towards success at that age. And I think it's inexcusable. It's absolutely inexcusable. It's got to be changed.
Well, and here's the next thing, and I'll finish up with the fact that, you know, if the forests go to burning and we haven't put people out, in the forest to work, and the forests are burning up, which the snowpack was 36% of what the standard was. I mean, this year it's bad, and all the the federal level politicians, they know it. They know it's coming, and it's pretty scary. That's why I say I'll take every drop of rain I can get my hands on. All right, in closing, and I want to mix this up a little bit, Mark. Good leaders need to make great decisions, big decisions on a regular basis. Tell me the biggest 3 decisions you've made in your life, good, big decisions that you've made.
Well, probably the biggest decision would probably be to stay in school, and then I'm the decision to become an Eagle Scout myself. I stuck with Scouts. It's a long process. You got to earn the merit badges, do the project, stuff like that. But it basically molded who I am today as a man of honor and integrity and character. And in terms of the third decision, probably would be to have my kids. I mean, I have 2 daughters, Heather and Sarah, ages 10 and 11. And I tell you, becoming a father changes your life. I mean, it's no longer just about you or me anymore. It's about them. It's about securing their freedom in a country that I grew up in that, as I said, was based upon freedom, and that's what we need.
And what about public service? Biggest decision?
Public service, as I said earlier in my opening statement, I just had to get off the couch, stop watching TV and complain, and I couldn't wait around for the establishment folks to actually do something. I had to actually get out there as an American, as a patriot, and do it myself if I'm going to get it done.
Exactly. Joe Ray, your biggest decisions ever made in your life, and hardest, I mean the ones that are hardest and biggest.
Okay, the biggest decision that I've ever made in my life is accepting Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. That's number 1. Number 2 was marrying my husband. I met him when I was 16, going on 17. We've been together 41 years. And, of course, having kids, that was a huge decision, because when we got married, we weren't going to have kids. So that was huge, because I was looking at the future of our country way back in the 1970s and not liking what I was seeing. And so the hardest decision that I've made is I gave up my career as a financial planner. I let all of my licenses go. I went all in to run for this seat because I believe so strongly in the founding principles of our country and what this country means, not just to Americans, but as a shining light to millions of people around the world. That's the hardest decision, yet the easiest one at the same time, because I know what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing, to go out there and say, look, a Main Street American gets it, we can do it, and I can listen, and we can make change, and we can get this country moving again.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe Ray. Sorry about that annoying phone call. Jason, Representative Conger, your toughest and biggest decisions that you've ever made in your life?
Well, it's probably common to a lot of people that the answer is getting married, and I'm sure it was tougher for Amy than it was for me, and having children. And clearly those 2 rank right up there. I think a little bit deeper, we were told that our daughter, we had a sonogram in Amy's,
pregnancy?
But kind of early on, and when it came back, all of a sudden, she went back to an appointment, and all of a sudden it was, instead of talking about the baby and the happy faces and everything, she was put in kind of a sterile room, and the doctor started, and the nurses started talking to her about the fetus, and told us that they thought maybe our daughter had Down syndrome and that we should consider abortion. And of course, that was not a possibility, but it was a pretty big decision to walk out of there and, reject that.
Wow, big. Well, Jason, congratulations on that, though, for doing the right thing. Tim, biggest decisions in your life?
Absolutely. I would say the biggest decision was getting married to my wife, Ashley. It wasn't the toughest one at all, by any stretch of the imagination. And she's just a beautiful, intelligent, and loving woman, and very well educated, Florida Atlantic, Dartmouth, and Oxford educated. I'm just a lucky guy. And I would say next would be deciding to attend, while I was at Williams College, deciding to go overseas to attend the American University of Beirut. That really shaped a lot of my future from there on out. and the kind of work that I was involved in. And finally, law school, the decision to go to law school following the Federal Reserve and my work there. The reason is just because it really is formative in the way that it trained me to think. They say to think as a lawyer, it has been a real positive and a blessing to be able to train in that kind of logical rigor.
Okay. Jason Conger just had to excuse himself. He had prior engagements, so he had to leave. We just thank him so much for his time this morning. And I tell you what, I want to give closing statements. Mark, anything particular you want to say to the voting public this morning?
Well, as I said, my campaign team and our message is simple. Our message is freedom. And that's what our country was founded upon. That's what we need to get back to. As I said, right now, we have our government overreaching into our lives, and we all value freedom. We just have been told by our government basically defining what our freedoms are, when they shouldn't be doing that. We are Americans here. Our freedoms and our rights are given to us by God, not by government. I'm a Christian myself. I'm not afraid or ashamed to talk about that in an environment of political correctness, which, in my opinion, political correctness will be the death of our great nation. But the central message, as I said, my campaign and I are getting out there. We need a senator that's going to stand strong with Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Mike Lee, and not back down until our freedom is restored. And I am that senator.
Excellent, Mark. Joe Ray, closing thoughts?
Yes. One of the biggest things that I want the voters to know is I make a promise that my staff and I will read every bill that is presented to us before I vote or before I decide how I'm going to vote on it. And every bill must pass the following. Number one, is it congruent with the Constitution of the United States and the amendments as originally intended? Number two, is it free of pork barrel spending and unrelated projects? That was number two. Number three, is it fiscally and socially conservative? It has to pass all three, not one of the three. I will stick to the Constitution. I am running because as a Main Street American, I understand what it's like, and I believe that America's best days are not behind us. They're still ahead of us if Americans, please take your privilege and vote. This is something people around the country die to be able to do, and people in this country have died to vote. Please vote.
All right, good deal. I want to conclude our, and Tim, yes, I'm sorry, go right ahead. You're closing?
Yes, I spoke a little bit before about that 7% differential between the Republicans and the Democrats and making that differential up with the independents, unaffiliated, and alternative party voters, which is the remaining 29% of Oregon. That 29% is predominantly young people, and they feel at this moment that their interests are not being represented. Their money has already been spent in the government. That in any future earnings they have, that it's all been wasted already. And so their voice is extremely important, and they're ready to rise up behind somebody that listens and knows their interests. And I sit right on that cusp of the millennial and X generation, and have been very much interested in a part of this community. So I think that reaching out to these folks is very, very important for this election.
Yeah. Tim, excellent. And Mark, great comments this morning. Joe Ray, thank you so much for coming in, and Representative Conger as well. I guess in closing, just everyone needs to get out to vote, read the information that you've got, make a good decision, and ask and continue the dialogue, right, amongst voters. I think that's the key, is have that dialogue, that civil discourse. And we say on the show all the time, it's okay to disagree. It's just not okay to be disagreeable. So, Joe Ray, Perkins, thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig.
You bet,
Craig.
Mark and
Thank
Tim.
you, Craig.
The websites for the candidates, Joe Ray Perkins, her website, perkinsforussenate.com. Tim Crawley, his website is Crawley for Oregon or timothycrawley.com, either one, however you do that. And it's CRAWLEY. And Mark Callahan, CallahanforOregon.com. And I thank all the gentlemen. And then as well, Representative Jason Conger, his website, CongerForOregon.com. And thank you again to come out on the Republican ticket today. And I know your time is valuable. So appreciate your time this morning. And I'm happy to have you back in as we continue this process. But I know you're busy. And so I'm thankful for the time we got this morning. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Craig.
you.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you.
We'll have a break coming up right